Welcome everybody to our video teaching series, Mind That Child. My name's Margot and it's my great privilege to introduce Dr. Dougal Sutherland today. He's a clinical psychologist who works at Victoria University and has had many years experience working with children and families. Dougal is married to the lovely Rachel and he has two great kids, Isaac and Lizzie. So sit back everyone, relax and get ready to hear from Dougal today as we learn about those trickiest and most amazing people to parent teenagers. Welcome, Dougal.
Well, kia ora whānau. Thanks for that great welcome. Fantastic to be with you guys today. As Margot said, I'm a clinical psychologist. I work at Vic Uni and I've got a long history of working in DHBs with children and adolescents and families. So I'm also from Equippers Wellington, which is probably really important. And so it's great to be able to give in to the Equippers family by bringing you this workshop. I ran this workshop, Mind That Child, a few years ago now in Welly, and we've shaken it off, blown the dust off it and pulled it out for you guys. So it's significantly zhuzhed up and revamped. So really looking forward to bringing you this today. So we're going to start talking about teens, partly because they're tricky beggars, aren't they? So it's a good place to start. And I'm going to get my clicker working. There we go. Why me? Why am I going to talk to you about this kind of stuff? Sure, I'm a clinical psychologist, but as Margot mentioned, I also have my own kids. And I think having your own kids or being a parent is something that you can't describe or explain to people until they've actually had them. You can have all the theory in the world, and I did before I had kids, knew all the right things to do, but it's not until you actually have them, until you're living that life, that they really come into their own, I guess, come into reality. So I do have my own kids. They're not perfect. This is a shot of my son. Some of you might know him. This is Isaac as a slightly younger man. And this is my daughter Lizzie down here, again, slightly younger. Don't show her this because she'll get incredibly embarrassed because she's 14, right? So perfect age for this. So this is not about being perfect. So one message I would love you to take away right now is release yourself from being perfect. There is no perfect parent. You will not find one. There are no perfect kids. You will not find one. So release yourself from being perfect. You do not have to be perfect. You just have to be good enough. Good enough is good enough. It's okay. We make mistakes, we stuff up, we do things we wish we hadn't done, we get riddled by guilt and shame and embarrassment and sadness and anxiety, and that's about being a parent. Your kids will get that too, by the way, sorry. So this is not about being perfect, it's about being good enough. I want to share with you this great quote. So A.A. Milne, he's the guy that wrote Winnie the Pooh, right? And I love this quote. It says, "Here is Edward Bear coming downstairs now, bump, bump, bump on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin." So you can imagine Pooh being dragged down, bang, bang, bang on the back of his head. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs. But sometimes he feels that there really is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. This is your moment to stop bumping your head. We get on that automatic pilot of parenting, of life. You get up in the morning, probably earlier than you want to. You get up, you have breakfast, you do your devotionals because you're a good Christian. And then you have breakfast, you get the kids off to school, you go to work, you come home, you're probably ferrying somebody around to music or sports or some sort of e-group, something like that. You get dinner, you come home, you might have to do some work, sit down half an hour, check in with your partner, how's it going, tired, me too, go to bed, start again. And it doesn't give you a chance to breathe. What we really want from this series is just to allow you guys the time to stop and breathe. Stop and think, is what I'm doing as a parent, is this how I want to be? Am I doing what I want to do? What's guiding me? And so I want to be really clear about today. We're going to talk about some guiding principles for thinking about teens, and we're going to talk about values, your family values. So Teens. Who are they? What are they doing? They've invaded us. Now, don't tell them, but in the psychological literature, teenager isn't even a great word. Young person, adolescent, is actually 15 to 25. Now, my son's 19. Left Wellington to come to Auckland when he was 17 or 18. Yay, goodbye, you're an adult now. He's not an adult. 21, 22, 23, not an adult. And we'll tell you why in a minute. But so this sort of stuff actually applies not only to teenagers, but also adolescents and young people who sometimes think they're older than they are, but they're still young. So what are they going through? Firstly, awkwardly, puberty. Hopefully you guys know about that. I'm not going to tell you a lot about puberty. It's not really my bag. I'm a psychologist. We deal with the head, not anything below the neck. So I don't know much. Well, I know about as much as you do, but puberty is hugely important, right? Puberty, in terms of there's masses of hormones running around your body. You'll remember back, probably. Oh yeah, I remember. I remember what it was like. There were hormones all over the place, doing things that I didn't know about. So often that brings with it firstly, physical changes in the body, obviously. Increased self-awareness. People going, oh my God, look at these, look at this. What is that? Oh my gosh, I've got hair in all these funny places. So there's increased awareness of your own body, right? And with that often comes a little bit of embarrassment. Show me a 14 or 15-year-old girl who's really happy with their body image. I don't think you'll find one. So puberty, there's lots of changes going on. There's lots of hormones going on. There's lots of emotions going on, which I think is really crucial. The next really important thing about adolescents, teenagers, young people, what we've called there is individuation. Now, individuation simply means this process whereby a young person is moving from being nested within the family, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, all cuddling up and watching TV together on a Saturday night, to moving out of that family and pretty much rejecting everything that you and your family stand for. I don't want a bar of that. I want to be my own individual. Individuation, really important part. We all go through that as humans. Animals go through it as well. You're making your way in the world. You're separating out from your family. You're marking yourself off as different. Boundary testing. Sort of the two go hand in hand, right? As an adolescent starts to mark out their territory, figure out themselves, they start to push the boundaries a little bit. They start to, can I really stay out that late? Can I speak like this? Can I do this? And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. So, in fact, I would say if your adolescent isn't pushing the boundaries at some level, you might have more of a problem than if they are pushing the boundaries, because boundary testing is quite normal. And that's a useful thing to keep in mind. Keep in mind that when your kids sass you out, when they are late home, when they do things that you don't want them to do, that's normal. Great, I've got a normal kid. Whew, not abnormal. And lastly, the big question, who am I? You can sort of see how these things go together, right? Becoming an adult, pushing away from families, finding out the rules and the limits in life, and figuring out as part of that who they are. Who am I? How do I differ from other people? How am I the same as other people? And for adolescents and teenagers, as much as we as parents would love them to view us as their role models, it's probably not going to happen. They'll take a bit of you or a bit of their mum or whoever else is around them, but they're trying to mix themselves up and figure out who they are. And it is a mixy old time. It's a confusing time for lots of people. But that's completely normal. So puberty, individuation, that's pushing away, becoming an individual different from your family. And that I realise that in different cultural groups that can be quite difficult, right? From a Western Pākehā perspective, oh, that's cool, off they go, be their own individual. But from a much more collective communal culture, Pacifica Māori, that might bring with it some more tensions as somebody tries to push out, strive for their own course, but also stay true to their family, their whānau. There's boundary testing, which is quite normal, and there's this whole search for identity. Who am I? So I want you to keep those things in mind as we talk about adolescence, because they're really important sort of founding principles, if you like, for thinking about teenagers. Think about, because I really want you to think about those when you're thinking about your teenager's behaviour. Why are they doing something? Maybe it's related to one of these. Often when we figure out why somebody's doing something, it helps us be able to respond to that in a much more thoughtful way. So I want you to keep in mind puberty, individuation, boundary testing, and the search for identity. Who am I? And as I've kind of alluded to already, worst of all, adolescents, teenagers, young people, they've only got almost literally half a brain. We know that there are three, and you'll probably be thinking about your adolescent here going, amen to that, I know that that's the truth. There are three major periods of brain development in humans. Firstly, in utero. Not a surprise, right? A growing baby, mother's stomach, or mother's womb, don't think they're actually in the stomach. Massive period of brain development. Second period of brain development in the first 3 years of life. And you might have picked up on this recently, that there's been a whole push to have a real focus on these first 3 years of life, a really crucial phase of life and brain development. The third, and here the most relevant part of brain development, happens in adolescence. 15 to 25-year-old. Now, the bit of the brain that's developing here is this bit right in the front of your forehead. The technical name is the prefrontal cortex, and there will be a quiz at the end and you'll have to remember that, and if you don't, you'll be thrown out of the church. So the prefrontal cortex, what is that used for? Well, that's used for thinking, planning, logistics, decision making, those adult thought patterns. So when we say that adolescents are impulsive and they just do things off the cuff, or they respond to emotions really rapidly, that's exactly right, because that part of their brain that's used for emotional control is still developing. So it's really important to keep that in mind. You're dealing with somebody who's not fully there, and that's okay. They're just normal. So, really important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about how you respond to an adolescent. Do you want to respond to them right in the moment, when they're pinging off and yelling at you and saying all sorts of words that they must have picked up from their mother, because they wouldn't have picked them up from me? Or do you just want to wait until they're a little calmer, because they don't have as much control as we do as their parents? So, really important to bear that in mind. I want to introduce you to some guiding principles that I think are really cool or really important for thinking about raising up teens and adolescents. So we've just talked about some founding kind of principles, I guess, and now some guidelines that are really important. First of all, understand their stage of development. We just talked about the stages of development. Really important for you to think about that when you're thinking about your parenting. Where are they at? Why might they do this? Why would they suddenly overnight turn into this grumpy, terrible, sassy teenager? Yeah, maybe they're nothing to do with you. Maybe there's nothing to do with them, but it's just normal, part of their biology. So think about their stages of development, and use I think these are really useful, these 3 words for guiding your decisions around parenting teens. Is it a health issue? Is it a safety issue? Is it a values or a moral issue? If it's not, maybe you don't need to sweat it. Now, probably the most room for debate around is what are values, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And that's actually going to be the focus for the rest of this session, is thinking about your values. So health is pretty clear, right? Is this a behaviour that's going to cause injury? Drink driving, it's a health issue probably, and I'm sure many people would say it's a values issue, right? But piercings, is that a health or a safety issue? Probably not. Is it a values issue? It may be in your house. I can't tell you what your values are, but it may not be. Okay, well, off you go, do it. I wouldn't do it personally, but if you want to do it, go for gold. Safety. When you're making decisions about your teens, is this a safety issue? It's all right, Mum, I'll just walk home at 11 o'clock from that party, 11 o'clock at night. Is that a safety issue? Yeah, probably. I don't know where I'm going to stay tonight. I'm going with friends. I just met them yesterday. I think that might be a safety issue. Probably. So, when you're thinking about how you respond to teens, is this a health issue? Is this a safety issue? Or is this a values issue? And we're going to talk about values in a second. If it's none of those three, maybe it's not worth the fight. Because remember, part of going back to stages of development, part of being a teenager is figuring out who you are and pushing boundaries. And so you want to have some boundaries, absolutely, and you need to have boundaries. But you don't want to have boundaries about every little thing. Otherwise, you're going to get what we call psychological reactance, where they just kick back towards you or against you because everything you've got is so nailed down and so tightly rule-bound, and you'll get a whole lot of rebellion then. So, health, safety, values. And if you do those, I reckon you've done the groundwork for parenting a teenager. So, trying to keep it as simple as possible, right? Otherwise, it can get incredibly complicated. Now, doing the groundwork, planting a tree, just like planting an adolescent, you sort of nurture it and grow it as a little baby and as a child, and then it starts to become an adolescent, and you just have to let it go a little bit. Not completely, but you do have to let it sort of grow on its own somewhat. And so if you know and understand these, you've got these in place, then I reckon sit back, see how it goes, allow people to make mistakes, but use these as your boundaries, your guiding principles. So let's talk a little bit more about values. Now, values are really, really important to all of us as humans. Values will guide our behaviours if we let them. But often, my experience is that people haven't necessarily stopped and figured out explicitly what their values are. What is important to me as a person? What is important to us as a couple, if there are two of you parenting? What is important to us as a family? This might be a great time to stop and pause, and I'm going to set you this for homework actually. I'm going to say to you, go away and figure some of this out for yourself, because you need to sit down and do this. We've listed a whole bunch of values up here. Now, don't try and have however many there are, 30 odd, 25, 30 odd there. Try and whittle them down to have like 3 or 4 core values. And a useful way of thinking about values in your family is thinking, what is the most important bits for us as a family? What are the important things? How would I like my family to be described by other people? Now, for a church or a Christian audience, the default is often, family values or Bible-based values. Yeah, I've got to say, I agree, but you're going to have to be more specific than that, because the Bible's quite thick. I don't know if you've read it, but it's quite a thick book. There's probably lots of values in there. So just saying your life or your family is based on all these is probably too much and probably too vague. And family values, I don't even know what those mean. You might have a definition and you might want to break that down. I'll tell you why. Because it can give you, can point to two different types of behaviours. So, I value family. Great. What do you do that shows you value family? Well, I work 3 jobs. I work 80 hours a week because I always want to make sure that I provide for my family, because I need to make sure that they don't go without. Family values. Okay, what about, I have family values too. That I make sure that I'm home 6 o'clock every night, make sure I have dinner with the kids and put them to bed, and I'm there for them at night. Family values. So you can see how they can be different things for different people. There are no right or wrong values necessarily, but think about what those are for you. So here are some examples. Caring, generous, humorous, loving, responsible, respectful, helpful, cooperative. There are a whole lot, playful, energetic. There will be values that are not up there. But what I'd like you to think about as a family, and this might be particularly for teenagers, something you want to do together with your teenagers, although you probably want to do it, if there's 2 of you parenting together, do it as a couple first and then bring the others in. But sit down and think about, what are the guiding principles? What are 3 or 4 key important things? And it might just be a case of sitting back and looking at your life and going, oh, actually, you know what? We really value activity and sports. You know, all of us are involved in different sports, and, you know, we get home and then we go out and play touch or make sure that we always get outside. Cool. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But bear in mind that your values will drive your behaviour. So you can't do everything. If you're out playing touch every night after work, And after school, that's cool. But you might not get the dishes done. So you might have a dirty kitchen, right? And that's the balance. And that's okay. You might say, actually, we're going to leave the dishes because we're really, one of the values for our family is being sporty and energetic and athletic. Cool. Other people might say, no, we're really, having tidiness and helping each other out around the house and making sure the chores are done. That's a sort of value for us. And so we might prioritise making sure the dishes are done rather than going outside after dinner. Different strokes for different folks. Nothing right or nothing wrong. But the real key message I want to get across to you is think about your values as a family. What are they? What are the guiding principles? How do you want your family to be? They will end up being something. I'll tell you now, you'll end up with a family that has some values. Other people might be able to see them. Oh, this is an extra for experts. I just thought about this. If you have some really trusted friends, you've got to do this high trust environment, right? You could say to them, hey guys, we've been looking at this, watching this sort of course on teens, and they're talking about values. You know our family. You look in on us. You see us. From looking in on us, what do you think our values are? Because other people will see the behaviours that you do, and from that they'll infer what the values are. So you need to have values, you need to have behaviours that go without those values, right? Without the behaviours, the values are just meaningless kind of ideas. Other people can't see your values, they can't see what's in here or what's in here. They will see your behaviour. So you could flip it around and say, well, based on my behaviour, what do you think my values are? And that might help you uncover your values, or it might make you pause for thought and go, actually, I think we need to change our behaviour because our behaviour is not in line with our values at all. There's a parallel here with gifts of the Spirit and outworking of the Spirit, right? In terms of a Christian sense, that you can have all these gifts, but if you don't use them, they're just sort of defunct and meaningless. So, values, identify your values. So, think about how closely you're living your life in accord with your values once you've identified them. Are you living life really right in there tightly with your values? Are the behaviours that you do really tightly connected with your values? Or maybe this arrow is a bit further out. Actually, maybe the behaviours aren't really so closely connected with our values. If so, it might mean that you have to change your behaviour. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So identify your values, identify the behaviours that go with it, and how closely are they aligned? Bullseye, right? How closely am I, if your value is right in the middle, how closely am I, or is our family, living in accord with our values? So, homework. Really want you to, a bit like values and behaviours, right? If you just listen to this for however long I've been going on for, 20 or 30 minutes, possibly 3 hours by now, I don't know. If you just listen to it and don't do anything about it, it's just theory. I want you to live out this. I want you to be able to take this and put it into practice in your family. So you're going to have to do something. So, homework. What are your values? This part. What are the behaviours that go with those values? And if there's a disconnect, think about, well, if these values are really important to us, how are we going to change our behaviours so we start living in line with those? It might mean you do something different. It might mean that you stop doing something. I don't know. You'll have to figure that out. So, I'm going to leave you with that for the end of this session. Values. What are the behaviours that go with them? Maybe have a chat with the people around. If you're watching this as an e-group and you know the people in your e-group and trust them, you could have a chat about it. What are yours? What are mine? What do you think mine are? That could be a challenging question, right? But I want to leave you with that. I want you to go away, think about that, and we'll come back for the next session on specific areas of concern that people often have about their teens. So thanks for your time. Go well. Get into this. Last tip. Make a specific time to do this homework. Don't say, oh yeah, I'll do it next week. No, you won't. Say, we're going to do it Monday night, 7:30, just for example. If you're specific, if you're really specific about when and where you're going to do something, you're much more likely to do it rather than just say, I'll do it at some stage. So, as soon as you turn this off, you've got to turn to your partner if they're there and say, when are we going to do this exercise? What day, what time? So that's your homework for and we'll see you back next session.
Well, hi everybody. We're having a bit of a Q&A with Dougal after that amazing session talking to us about our teenagers. But first things first, Dougal, how does it feel to be famous? For those of you who don't know, Dougal is on TV a lot.
I don't know if I'm that famous. I've never been recognised. Some people that I know have said, I've seen you on TV, but I've never had anybody publicly stop me in the street and say, you're on TV, aren't you?
So, man, that's sad. I feel sad for you. So no bodyguard?
No bodyguard, no perks either, I've got to say. Nobody's given me anything for free, but although that's a little bit of a suggestion.
Yeah, that's right. There's always a first time. There's
always a first time. If you see me, I'd love to have a gift.
Cool. Sorry about that. Just
that's cool. All good.
Important things first. But thank you so much. It was such great detailed information. Cool. I really loved the guiding principles that you talked about and how important it is to understand the stage of development with teenagers, because the old school idea is that we think of them as adults, All children were shrunken down adults, but they're really not. No. So I just had a question, because we've got 3 teenagers too.
Sure.
And one of the things that I find is that we just completely forget that. That they're different from us. And how do we remind ourselves that they're not like us, and we need to remember that stage of development?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that you can do in any sort of parenting situation is try as much as possible to keep your own cool. Right. To step back, and I'm preaching to myself as much as I'm preaching to anybody else, is that importance of just being able to stop and take a breath, even if it's just to. Even take 3 deep breaths, literally take 3 deep breaths. It just helps settle us down. And then, because what happens when we get stressed, and often parenting is stressful, right? You're dealing with somebody that's in your face, that's yelling, that's done something you feel really angry about, and your blood's boiling. When your blood's boiling, your brain's not working. So just being able to stop and pause, just in the moment, and pause, and that will help your brain come back online. And it might be at those times that you go, oh yeah, that's right, they've only got half a brain. Poor things. So just the ability to stop and pause. And we do this, we're supposed to do this in our Christian lives, right? We're supposed to stop and pause every day. Right. Reflect, think about it, pray. Same for parenting. You might have to pray for parenting, to be honest too. But the principle of stopping, pausing, and just in that space allowing yourself just to calm a little, and some of those things will pop back into your mind. Go, oh yeah, that's right, I'm dealing with a 14-year-old, I'm dealing with a 16-year-old. They're full of emotions and hormones, and their brain's not fully functioning.
That's great advice. Take a breath and listen and think ourselves. Now, New Zealand obviously has an interesting or not great reputation for our some of our family statistics, things like domestic violence or our own parenting situations we've been raised in. What advice can you give to those of us, and there are many of us, who've grown up in less than ideal parenting, and the modelling has not been great?
Look, firstly, I think if you're doing this, if you're watching this, you're already on the right path, right? Because you're already stopping and go. And that quote that I had at the start about Winnie the Pooh bumping his head down the stairs, and again relating back to just being able to pause and have a breath, that actually stopping and reflecting, if you're listening to this, you're already doing that, and use that to stop and self-reflect. We don't reflect enough on ourselves, and you will operate on automatic pilot. We all get into automatic pilot on whatever we do. Now, that automatic pilot, unless you adjust it, will probably be driven from what you've learnt and picked up. So pause and interrupt your automatic pilot and take on board things like this. Actively engage. You know, we talked about homework. Actually do the homework. Don't kind of go,
do the homework.
Do the homework.
Not like high school,
yeah,
actually do it.
Yeah, I'm going to come around, I'm going to check. But I mean, the thing about it is practice, right? You need to practice. If you want to get a new behaviour going, which is essentially kind of what we're talking about, you need to practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it. So practice it, practice it, practice it, and get yourself some good input. Surround yourselves with good people, supportive people. You know, like if you're watching this as an e-group, that's great, right? Because that's a sort of like a small whānau. This is our equippers whānau, and we're doing life together. So surround yourself with people who you can take on board information from, who if they say something, you're going to say, yeah, I'll take that in, rather than go, I'm not going to listen to what you say. Yeah. So, because heaps of us don't have ideal backgrounds in many ways, but you don't have to let that dictate where you're going to go.
That's great, yeah. We don't have to, you know, as Reggie Dav says, let our past dictate our future.
Absolutely.
There's a way forward.
Cool.
So, yeah, I think that's probably almost it for our wee chat. Great. I loved the homework you've set about values.
Yep.
That's just so important as a family. And I'm like, the thought I had as I was listening was that it adds flavour and colour to our world.
Yeah.
With different family values, different families have their different groove.
Absolutely.
You know, and imagine if we were all the same. If all we wanted to do was work hard, well, you know, how boring. There's families who love music, outdoors families who love, you know, beautiful things done well, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's values are really about how you do things.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily about what you do.
Right.
They might dictate a little bit of that, but they're often about how you do it.
Okay.
Who is the type of person that I'm going to be? What are the type of people we want to be in our family?
Yeah.
Do we want to, so it's about who you are as much as what you do. So and as you say, it gives people flavour. Yeah. You know, we don't want everybody. We're not all the same. Yeah. And find out what really are the values for you and your family, because that gives you individual flavour. Those are you. So that's great.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dougal.
Cheers.
Great, guys. We'll see you soon.